What if the reason you haven't found what you're really looking for isn't about strategy, isn't about habits, isn't about working harder? What if the real reason is something much simpler, something so close to you that you've been looking past it your entire life? I want to tell you about a man. His name was Narayana Murthy. He grew up in a small village in India, 13 siblings, a one-room house, a father who worked as a school teacher and made almost nothing. There were nights the family had to decide which children would eat and which ones would go to bed hungry. By all conventional measures, Narayana Murthy had no chance. Wrong family, wrong connections, wrong starting point. But today, he is the founder of Infosys, one of the most successful software companies in the history of India, a company worth tens of billions of dollars. When journalists asked him how he did it, he never talked about strategy first. He always started somewhere else. He said, "Before I could build anything outside, I had to understand something inside. Something about the nature of the self, about what I actually was, beneath the fear and the hunger." And then he would quote from a text he had read as a young man, a text written 3,000 years ago. That text is called the Upanishads. And today, I'm going to take you inside it, not the academic version, not the dry philosophical version, the version that actually changes the way you see yourself. Stay with me, because what I'm about to tell you is not information. It's more like remembering something you always knew and somehow forgot. Here is the strange thing about the book I want to tell you about. Almost nobody talks about it. Not in schools, not in business programs, not in the self-help section at the bookstore. And yet, the philosopher Schopenhauer, one of the greatest Western minds who ever lived, read this text and said it was the most profound thing he had ever encountered. He kept it beside his bed until the day he died. Ralph Waldo Emerson read it. He said it cracked something open in him that he had never been able to reach before. Henry David Thoreau read it. He said he carried it to the pond, where he lived alone for 2 years, and read it every morning, and quietly, without press releases or announcements. Some of the most consistently successful people of the last 100 years have made their way back to this text again and again, not because it teaches wealth strategies, because it answers the question that wealth strategies are secretly trying to answer. That question is this: who are you when everything is stripped away? Not your name, not your job, not your net worth, not the story you tell yourself at 3 in the morning when you can't sleep. Who are you, really? The book is called the Upanishads, and the answer it gives, once it actually lands, will feel less like new information and more like walking back into a room you have always lived in, but somehow never noticed. Let's go back in time. Around 800 years before the Common Era, something happened on this planet that philosophers have never fully explained. Not in one place, not gradually, in multiple places, at the same time, as if the world itself had decided it was time for something to shift. In China, a man named Laozi walked out of a city gate and handed a border guard 81 short poems before disappearing into the wilderness. Those poems became the Tao Te Ching. In Greece, Socrates was in the marketplace, asking questions that made powerful men so uncomfortable, they eventually sentenced him to death. In India, unnamed sages, men and women who had left their homes, their wealth, their identities, were sitting in forests, beside rivers, and asking the deepest question a human being can ask. Not how do I get more, not how do I win, but what is this? What is the thing in me that knows it is alive? The German philosopher Karl Jaspers studied this period and gave it a name. He called it the Axial Age, the axis on which human thought permanently shifted. Because for the first time, human beings weren't just surviving, they were wondering. And what is extraordinary, what has never been fully explained, is that they all landed on the same question, across cultures that had never met, that spoke different languages, that had no contact with each other. The same question arose. Is there something in me that is deeper than my thoughts? Deeper than my fears? Deeper than my name and my history? Something that doesn't change, even when everything around me is falling apart? The Upanishads are the record of what happened when one group of those seekers actually found the answer. Now let me tell you a story, one of the most famous images in the entire tradition. And once you hear it, it will stay with you. Imagine a tree, old, deep-rooted, the kind of tree that has been standing longer than anyone can remember. On this tree sit two birds, same branch, close together. From a distance, you might think they are one, but they are two. The first bird is restless. It hops from branch to branch. It eats the fruit of the tree, sometimes sweet, sometimes bitter. And its entire world is defined by whatever it's tasting. Right now, when the fruit is sweet, it is excited. It wants more. It is briefly happy. When the fruit is bitter, it panics. It looks desperately for something better. It has opinions about everything. This branch is better than that one. This fruit is good. That fruit is wrong. Things should be different than they are. Its whole existence is one long, exhausting reaction. The second bird doesn't eat. It doesn't move. It just sits, completely still, not disturbed by what the first bird does. Not excited when the fruit is sweet, not distressed when the fruit is bitter, just watching with a kind of quiet presence that nothing can shake. Now, the question the Upanishads ask you about this image is simple. Which bird are you? And the answer, the real answer, is both. You are both birds. The restless one is what these ancient texts call the ego self, the personality, the one with a name and a past, the one that wants things and fears losing them, the one that gets hurt, gets scared, gets jealous, gets ambitious. This is the self most of us spend our entire lives identified with. The still one is what the texts call the true self, the witness, the awareness, the part of you that watches your own thoughts without being swept away by them. Now, here is what matters. The Upanishads do not say the ego is evil. They don't say you should destroy it or be ashamed of it. They say it is simply limited, like a wave that has forgotten it is made of ocean. The wave rises, the wave falls. The wave spends its brief life worrying about how big it is, whether it's big enough, whether the wave next to it is bigger. But the whole time, underneath, it is ocean. It was never not ocean. Think about the last time you were really gripped by anxiety, not just nervous, genuinely gripped. Now ask yourself, who was watching that fear? Because something in you was watching it. Something noticed it. There is a part of you that can say, I notice I am afraid. Not I am afraid. Full stop. This is all I am. That noticing, that quiet capacity to observe your own inner weather without being destroyed by it. That is the second bird. That is what the Upanishads spent 3,000 years trying to point you toward. And here is why this matters practically. Because the bird you operate from determines everything, not just how you feel, how you decide, how you act, what you build, what you're willing to risk. The restless bird makes decisions from craving and fear. It grabs for what it wants and runs from what it fears. And decisions made from fear are almost always the wrong ones. The still bird makes decisions from a different place entirely. Clarity, patience, an inner steadiness that doesn't need a particular outcome to feel okay. And decisions made from that place are almost always better. This is not philosophy. This is the most practical thing I can possibly tell you. Let me tell you another story, because I don't want you to think this is abstract. There was a boy named Nachiketa. His father was a priest who performed a sacred ceremony in which he was supposed to give away his most prized possessions. But Nachiketa watched his father and noticed something. His father was giving away the old cows, the sick ones, the ones past their usefulness, keeping the good ones for himself. And the boy, with the brutal honesty that only children have, walked up to his father and asked, "Father, if you're truly giving your best, then who will you give me to?" His father, embarrassed, snapped back without thinking, "I give you to death." A terrible thing to say, but Nachiketa heard it as a command. He thought, "My father said it, so it must be done." And he went. He walked to the realm of Yama, the god of death, and knocked on the door. But Yama was away. So Nachiketa sat down and waited. 1 day passed, then 2, then 3. 3 days and 3 nights. A boy sat alone at the doorstep of death, without food, without water, without complaint. When Yama finally returned and found the boy waiting, he was struck. This was not something he had seen before. Out of respect, he offered Nachiketa 3 wishes. Anything. For the first wish, the boy asked for peace between himself and his father. Granted. For the second, he asked to understand the nature of creation. Granted. Then came the third. Nachiketa looked at the god of death and said, "Tell me what happens when a person dies. Some say something survives. Some say nothing does. I want to know the truth." And here, Yama tried to bribe him out of it. He offered gold. He offered kingdoms, long life, beautiful companions, pleasures beyond imagining. "Ask for anything else," he said. "This question is too hard. Even the gods debate it. Choose something simpler." And Nachiketa said, "No." He said, "What use is gold to someone who knows he is mortal? What use are kingdoms when they all end? I don't want things that last only as long as my body lasts. I want to know what doesn't end." Yama went silent. Then he smiled. And he said, "You are right to ask. Few people ask the right question." And he told him this. There are 2 paths every person can choose. The first path follows pleasure. It follows what the ego wants, what feels comfortable, what the senses crave. The second path follows truth. It turns inward. It asks what is real beneath the surface of experience. Both paths seem good at the beginning, but only one of them leads to freedom. And then Yama said something that Nachiketa would carry for the rest of his life. He said, "The true self does not die. When the body dies, it was not born. It will not cease, ancient, eternal, unchanged by anything. That happens in the world of form. If the one who strikes thinks he strikes, and the one who is struck thinks he is struck, neither of them knows the truth. Because the deepest thing in you has never been harmed. Not once in all the failures you have experienced, all the losses, all the moments you felt broken. There was something in you that remained intact. You know this is true because you are here, still wondering, still asking. The restless bird suffered. Absolutely. But the still bird watched on. It always does. Now I want to tell you something about money, about wealth, about why the people who build it and keep it are almost never doing what you think they're doing. There is a French billionaire named Mohed Altrad. He was born in the Syrian desert to a Bedouin family. His mother died when he was an infant. His father refused to acknowledge him. He was raised by his grandmother, a woman who could not read, who lived in a tent, who had almost nothing. But she told him something. She said, "The only way out of this life is education." So he walked, literally walked, miles across the desert to attend a village school that barely existed. He taught himself French. He won a scholarship. He went to university in France. He arrived in a country where he knew no one, spoke the language imperfectly, had no money, no connections, no family safety net, and he built one of the largest construction equipment companies in Europe, Altrad Group, revenues in the billions. When people ask him what drove him, he says something interesting. He says it was never the money. He says, "I had nothing. And in having nothing, I had to find something inside myself that no one could take away. That thing, that inner ground, was what I built everything on top of. The money came. But it was never the foundation. The foundation was already there. This is the pattern, not just Altrad, not just Murthy. Look carefully at the people who build something real and sustain it over decades, and you will find the same thing underneath. Not a better strategy, not a lucky break. A relationship with the still bird, a sense of inner wholeness that doesn't depend on outer circumstances. And the paradox, the thing that sounds backwards until you see it clearly, is this: the moment you stop needing the result to feel okay, you become far better at creating it, because your decisions stop being driven by fear. And fear is the worst advisor a human being can have. Fear tells you to protect what little you have. Fear tells you to play small. Fear tells you that other people are competition, not potential. But when you are operating from the still bird, from that place of inner stability, something else becomes possible. Generosity, real generosity, the willingness to give value before you know what you'll get back, to trust, to take intelligent risks, to treat other people as part of the same thing you are. Because at the deepest level, you are. And generosity, real, genuine, sustainable generosity, is the mechanism behind every lasting success story I have ever studied. Without exception, the Upanishads weren't written for business, but what they describe about the nature of the self and its relationship to the world turns out to be the most useful thing a person building anything could possibly understand. Now let me go somewhere. That sounds even stranger. Bear with me. The Upanishads make a claim that stops most modern readers cold. They say, the world you experience, the world you see, touch, measure, and move through is not separate from you. At a deep level, it is a reflection of your inner state, not metaphorically, not just psychologically, at the level of what reality actually is. Now, before you dismiss that, consider what happened. In the 20th century, when physicists started looking at the behavior of very small things, at the level of particles, the smallest pieces of matter, they found something that shouldn't be possible. A particle, when it is not being observed, does not have a definite location. It exists in a cloud of possibilities. Only when it is measured, only when something interacts with it, Does it become concrete? Does it land in a specific place? Physicists have argued about what this means for 100 years. Some say it's just math. Some say it means consciousness is woven into the structure of reality. The debate is not settled. But what is settled is this. At the foundation of the physical world, something deeply strange is happening, something that doesn't match our ordinary experience of solid, separate things. The Upanishads described something pointing in the same direction 3,000 years before anyone had a particle accelerator. They said, consciousness is not something that happens inside the skull. It is the ground from which everything arises. Matter is a pattern within consciousness, not the other way around. Now, whether you take that literally or hold it lightly, the practical implication is the same. Your inner world and your outer world are not as separate as they appear. The quality of what you hold inside, your beliefs about yourself, your expectations about life, your fundamental sense of whether you are safe or threatened, whole or lacking, shapes your experience of everything. Not through magic, through attention, through what you notice, through the decisions you make, through the risks you take or avoid, through the way other people feel in your presence. The Upanishads call the world a mirror, not a mirror that reflects your face, a mirror that reflects your state of being. Look back at your life for a moment. The periods when things seemed to flow, when opportunities appeared, when connections formed easily, when you felt like things were working. What was your inner state during those periods and the periods of stagnation, when nothing seemed to open, when the same problems kept returning in different costumes? What was happening inside? I'm not saying you caused everything. That happened to you. Life is genuinely hard. Random things happen. Injustice is real. But there is a layer, a real observable layer, where your inner state and your outer experience are in conversation. And most of us have never been taught to work with that layer. We were taught to fix the outside. More effort, better tactics, stronger will. But the Upanishads start from the inside. Know what you are first. Not acquire first. Not perform first. Not prove yourself first. Know what you are first. Because you are the instrument through which your entire life is being played. And a tuned instrument plays music. An untuned instrument just makes noise. Let me tell you about Lester Levinson. New York, 1952. He was 42 years old, a successful businessman, a physicist by training, also 2 heart attacks, stomach ulcers, depression, a loneliness so deep that no amount of success had ever touched it. His doctors told him he had 3 months to live. Go home, they said. Rest. Don't exert yourself. So he went home, and instead of resting, he started thinking. Not planning, not strategizing, not trying to fix anything, just thinking about his life, about what had actually felt real. He made a list in his mind of every moment of genuine happiness he could remember. Not excitement, not the rush of a win, but real, clean, lasting happiness. The moments that didn't leave, a residue of wanting more. And he noticed something. Every single one of those moments had something in common. In those moments, he was giving something. He was in a state of love. Not receiving love, but being love, extending something outward, without calculating what he'd get back. And then he made another list. Every moment of real suffering. Every period of anxiety, inadequacy, fear. And those moments had something in common too. Wanting, needing something outside himself. To fill a space inside himself. Needing approval. Needing security. needing the result to be a certain way so he could finally feel okay. He sat with this for a long time, and then he understood something. Nothing outside can fill something inside. It's not designed to. The outside keeps changing. The inside keeps wanting. No matter how much arrives, more arrives is what the ego asks for. More. Different. Better. The wanting never stops. Because the wanting was never about the things. It was about a felt sense of wholeness that the things were supposed to deliver, but never could. He understood this. And then he started doing something simple. When a feeling arose, any feeling, fear, craving, sadness, anger, he didn't suppress it. He didn't analyze it. He didn't fight it. He just sat with it. He felt it completely. And then he released it, not by pushing it away, by unclenching the fist he hadn't known he was making, by letting it pass through him instead of holding it. He did this for months, alone, in his apartment, with no teacher, no system, no plan, just a man sitting with himself. And something started to happen. His health began to change, slowly, then noticeably, then dramatically. 3 months passed. He was not dead. 6 months passed. He was healthier than he had been in decades. And then, almost as a side effect, his financial life began to change too. Not because he worked harder, because he had stopped making decisions. From fear, Levinson went on to spend decades teaching what he had found. He called it releasing, but what he had found was the still bird. He had found the part of himself that fear cannot reach, the part that had been watching the whole time. And from that place, from that ground of inner quiet, everything else could be built. That is the Upanishadic principle, lived out in a single life. Now, I want to take you to the deepest place, because at some point, as you sit with these ideas, a question will come. It always comes. It goes like this. Okay, I understand. There is the ego self, and there is the true self, the witness, the still bird. I get it. But who is watching the witness? If I can observe my ego, and then observe the part of me that is observing my ego, isn't there something even further back? Won't I just find another watcher? And then another? Like standing between two mirrors. The reflection's going back forever. Where does it end? This question has been asked for thousands of years, and the Upanishads have a surprising answer. The answer is, the question itself contains an error. The error is this. You are assuming there are two things, a knower and a thing being known, a subject and an object. But the Upanishads say the deepest reality cannot be divided that way. They point to something like this. This is the one who sees, but it cannot itself be seen. This is the one who hears, but it cannot be heard. This is the one who knows, but it cannot be known as an object. Because the moment you try to make it into a thing, you've already stepped outside of it. And whatever you step into, that is also it. You cannot step outside of awareness, to look at awareness from the outside, because there is no outside of awareness. Everything you have ever experienced, every thought, every sensation, every moment of joy or grief or confusion has arisen inside awareness. Awareness is the one constant, the one thing that has never left through every experience, every version of yourself, every season of your life. Something was here, watching, present, unbroken. That something the Upanishads call Brahman, the infinite, the undivided, the awareness that underlies everything that is. And then they say 3 words that are perhaps the most important 3 words in the entire tradition. Tattvam asi, that thou art. that awareness, that infinite, undivided presence, is what you are, not a piece of it, not a reflection of it. You are that. The wave is not separate from the ocean. It never was. The feeling of separateness, the feeling of being a small, fragile self in a large, indifferent world. That is what the restless bird produces. It is the ego's fundamental mistake. But beneath that mistake, underneath all of that noise, the ocean is here. It was always here. It is here right now. As you listen to these words, let me ask you one final thing. Have you ever had a moment, just a split second, when the mental noise stopped? Not because you made it stop, just because it did. Maybe watching a sunset, or holding someone you love, or in those first few seconds, after waking from deep sleep, before the day came rushing back. A moment when there was no past to regret, and no future to fear. Just this. Just now. No story. No comparison. No wanting. Just presence. Tell me honestly, did it feel like emptiness? Or did it feel like fullness? Most people, when they really sit with it, say fullness, like something had been removed, not added. And what remained was more alive, more real, more okay than anything the striving ever produced. That moment, that is what the Upanishads spent 3,000 years trying to point you toward, not as a place to escape to, not as a retreat from life, as the ground you are always standing on, even when you've forgotten it's there. The sages did not say, go sit in a cave, give up on the world, want nothing. They said, understand what you are. And then from that understanding, live, fully, work, love, build things, take risks, fail, get back up, but know what you are while you do it. Know that the one who fails is not all that you are. Know that the one who succeeds is not the final word either. Know that beneath both the failure and the success, something is watching. Something is present. Something is fine. And decisions made from that place are different. They are generous. They are clear. They are not paralyzed by the fear of losing or inflated by the hunger for recognition. They are honest, direct, real. And real things last. 3,000 years ago, someone sat in a forest beside a river and asked the question that everything else was built around. Who am I? What they found was not an answer you can memorize and put in a notebook. It was a recognition that you are not only the restless bird, that there is a still bird, that it has always been there, that it is watching right now as you listen to these words. A recognition that the thing you most fear losing, your sense of being okay, of being enough, of being somehow safe in this world, was never actually in danger, because it was never located in the things you were afraid of losing. It is in you. It is you. In the deepest sense, it is the only thing you really are. The Upanishads will not give you a 5-step system. They will not give you a morning routine, but they will do something more rare and more useful than any of that. They will show you the still bird, and once you see it, once you actually feel it, even for 1 second, something changes. The craving doesn't vanish. The fear doesn't disappear, but they lose their authority. They stop being the ones who make the decisions, and something quieter takes over, something that has been waiting all along, waiting for you to slow down, waiting for you to stop, waiting for you to notice what has been watching all along. That is the Upanishads. Take care of yourself. I'll see you in the next one.